Okay, so you've run into the Afrika Korp and now you're struggling. Let's see if we can lend you a hand. So this build is a mixture of Armstrong's CoH3 rifle spam strategy and a strategy developed involving the airborne CoH3 by Corporal Shepard from CoH3.org, which came out around the time of Ardennes Offensive. We start with a mixture of Tier 0 infantry supported by a 30 cal. That's going to buy you time to get paratroopers on the field and, most importantly, the star of the show, your Quad 50, which, if you use efficiently, should allow you to quickly transition into M4 Shermans to really drive your opponent off the field. Back tech into healing to make sure your infantry are as effective as they can be. Get your 76mm upgrade, and you should be in good shape. Should you run into trouble and need to bridge the gaps here and there, paradrop an AT gun, maybe some medical supplies, and try supplementing in with a bazooka every now and then. Should put you in pretty good shape. Some threats you need to be concerned about are the Afrika Korp 8 rad. That thing is going to duel your Quad 50 pretty well and arrive maybe about a minute or two afterwards, depending on how you play. Earlier than that, though, you need to be concerned about a Flame Pioneer clown car. Make sure you're playing around your 30 cal. That will take down the half track and focus down any piles that you kind of see. I'm not particularly sure you should use this build against the Wehrmacht. It will work, but you'll find that snipers do a very good job of bleeding your elite infantry, and you don't have any counter to emplacements, unfortunately. One of the biggest weaknesses of this build is its lack of indirect fire. So if you're not playing aggressively and you allow your opponent to get entrenched, even on the single VP, something that they can fight from, you're going to be struggling to route them from the field, and that's kind of the key of this build. If you can mitigate those, you'll find though that you're going to get some very powerful early game power spikes with arguably the best shock unit of the game, which was going to come at a really early timing. Combine that all in together, you should have a pretty overwhelming field presence, and if you tactically make it work, you should be able to route your opponent from the field no problem. Let's jump into a game. Let's begin here with our capping order. Normally I'll send my first squad just to take directly the first victory point that's nearest our natural resources. If there's a high resource point on the way there, usually I'll send them to take that, and the second unit will come by and, as I say, connect everything else. As far as our build is concerned at this point, normally we'll be looking at between 3 and 4 squads of infantry, including your machine gun. You might prefer to bring up some engineers if you're dealing with garrisons or close quarters combat. They'll fight a little bit better than your pathfinders. But usually I'll prefer the paths simply for their scouting ability, as they have a very long range of sight, and that'll help plan my attacks. Now, what I'm doing here is a mistake. Immediately, I have to ask myself, what am I getting from this fight? I've already lost some manpower just from fighting this bike. And second pilot squad's going to come in, so there's no chance we're going to either take any of these points, and there's no chance that we're actually even going to bleed any manpower in return. So really, what I'm doing here is losing anywhere between, depending on the size of the fight, hundreds of manpower for no gain in return. Secondly, we have to think about where we are in enemy territory, right? We are, as a general rule of thumb, the further away from the headquarters you are, the earlier you have to retreat. And now, it's also not being very mindful of the other threats that the Afrika Korp can present at this moment. I'm probably kind of lucky that that's a bike and not a 250, which could very easily run that squad down and wipe it. Or, God forbid, he had, for instance, flame piles, which are a very reasonable possibility at this time, right? Those are threats that you need to be concerned about, and you can't be playing... The trick to the build here is finding a balance between your aggression, right, and choosing your spots. Like, for instance, here, I know he's blocking the cap. I don't want necessarily a hard retreat machine gun because I want it to be in play, and he's not chasing it down, so I can leave it in the field. But yeah, it's a tough balance because you also want to be, you notice I'm checking my CPs there, you need to be winning fights as well to try and get your pairs on the field as quickly as possible, or else you're going to run into the situation that I'm in now where, if you'll note, I'm floating a lot of manpower, which is normally not what you want to do, but because your units deploy instantly, you can kind of mitigate some of that. And again, I'm taking on another bad fight with the bike. That's probably me just being used to the CoH3 bikes, which would sort of explode to just about anything. Whereas here they're a little bit more sturdy. Again, I'm losing models trying to get into cover. But with the machine gun coming up, we should be able to at least buy some time here for my pairs to drop. Now, with the first squad, my thinking in deploying them behind the lines here is that we have a lot of units which are on the front lines, right? He has a Panzer Grenadier squad, which was basically knocking on our base. Bikes and Pyos up near the northernmost VP. If I bring this squad here, it can hopefully draw his units back and allow me to take more of a front line when I come through earlier on or later on with my units. At least that's the hope. He could very easily just keep pushing and ignore this. But turns out it's true. Really, that airborne squad should have been next to the truck into cover. I try and move them there, see if we can get the point. See the flame piles? We got to get out of there, and that's fine, right? That's a tactical idea that didn't necessarily come off, but we don't lose too much in the way of things either. So again, with the line of sight that we have, let's use that to our advantage. Place our machine guns into good kill zones if we can. While this has been happening, we get our quad 50 going, and you know, I'm floating 20 fuel, so I probably could have got that a lot sooner, really. Probably about a minute sooner if I was really paying attention, but again, still trying to iron things out. And you can see that as well in this fight. Like immediately when we set things up to begin with, I thought we were in a good position, and really we kind of are. We see the machine gun can target the bike, can pin these two squads, but it wasn't a good decision at all, realizing that enemy's base sector is right there, right? So really any unit could have come up instead. We're probably lucky it's just a Panzer Grenadier squad and not Guastatore. Another flame pile, something like that, which could have really come in and outflanked me here. This is a very aggressive machine gun placement, which doesn't really take into account thinking ahead, how the battle will kind of develop. Really, it probably should be back here, perhaps over here, being able to make our kill zones into these areas here, right? Just a little bit more conservative. And since we're not, unfortunately, we're going to lose it here. Again, I'm not too concerned because the the quad 50 is on its way up, and as we'll just see, we can instantly deploy a unit here, which, you know, 2 pairs in the quad 50 against, well, I guess my paths are kind of chipping in too, against this army composition, you should be expected to win it just about every time, right? And inflict some pretty big casualties. So it's unfortunate we lose the machine gun, but one of the benefits of these units and this build is that you kind of have a bit of leeway in, with the fast deployments. Dodge the grenade, route them from the field. Pretty straightforward attack, right? And he loses the bike. So overall, not a bad trade, right? Yeah, we lose the machine gun, but now we're in really good field position for the future here. So. And just basic stuff, right? Recrew our gun, get them out of there with the low health squad. And immediately, I always bring up an engineer first, as opposed to AT gun or anything like that, because the quad 50 will need repairs, and I want to place mines. This was really surprising to me. I did not expect the L640s. I had not really seen them before very much, and I didn't really know what to do. I know now that it can, like, my quad can probably do 1, but 2 of them, unclear. So I do realize he's attack moving though, which is useful for me. We can explain more of that in the future as well in a moment. But once I see that he is attack moving, because this squad is very low, I actually move these two up. They won't obviously do any damage, but if I move them up, my hope is that these two will target the paths instead, allowing the pairs to slip through unharmed, or at least make it back to headquarters. I get the quad 50 out of there because I'm not really sure. I don't want him diving right now more than anything, because he really could have done a lot of damage there to me, because I don't have a counter. Right? I have to think about, I've used that manpower float that I had earlier, and I need to think about what to do. The only real option I can come up with is bazookas on a pair of squad. It's not the worst. I would prefer to have them with 30 cals, but you know, at this point, you gotta do what you gotta do. And having an elite squad with AT weapons to push off light vehicles, not the worst thing in the world. So right now, I'm just trying to formulate. I saw that lone squad over there, and now this is kind of how I'm thinking tactically throughout this game. He catches me a bit trying to redeploy, that's fine. I can move troops around. This is how I think about fights now, is I'm trying to find weaknesses. I'm trying to find where my opponent overextends, and just kind of catch units, weak pockets of opposition, which I can kind of overwhelm with the quad 50. That's my goal here. And this is an excellent candidate, right? If we just take that unit down, no longer will he be able to his repair ability is curtailed, no longer can he place mines, and he's not going to be able to afford them for a while, right? He loses that flamethrower. So that is a very big win for us. I think when we consider what we've lost, just that machine gun, you know, we've taken down the bike, we've taken that squad out now. Our VPs are about even, but I would actually say we have a pretty big advantage right now. It might not seem like it, but yeah. And you see the quad 50 can just finish them off. They eat all kinds of DAC light vehicles. And yeah, we're really happy here. And the same thing, much like seeing that that flame pilot squad, when we see that machine gun up there, sorry, I just lost it. When we see that isolated machine gun, it is prime candidate really to try and outflank and destroy. So I'm happy for this squad here to get pinned. Your squads will also take less damage once they're in the pinned state, and I'm hoping that if he's not microing them, like he blundered this as well, which when he loses the flamethrower, again, that's fewer mines for him. That means that our quad can dive, which is a big tactical advantage to be able to have, or at least dive without the fear of mines. With that, so as I say, with that Pathfinder squad pinned, I can hopefully outflank him here. I order this pilot Paris squad to throw a grenade. Unfortunately, they don't listen for some reason. Excuse me. And instead run for the door. So we don't get the wipe, but again, we've routed them from the field, and we're just in a very good field position. You'll notice there I decide to get the airborne AT gun. I wasn't actually sure how much the L640s costed, and I didn't have a good handle about where his tech situation was, so I was kind of concerned about an 8-rad going up. Just having the ability to drop is beneficial to you. Otherwise, I would have gone for the munitions and health crates as a way to bridge the gap, because I'm going to be spending my fuel trying to get the tank depot up as fast as I can, right? We're going for that Sherman, so the 1 minute of fuel spent is actually going to be, you know, that's a minute where we could have a Sherman out faster. So. And yeah, you'll find yourself in this position a lot, I think, when you utilize a build like this. You'll notice my NG squad there is really low because of the grenade they took. The squad members are still very weak, so he has to kind of stay at base. He can't really be doing too many aggressive things. A quick little tip as well, with the new HDR, unfortunately with my levels you can't hear it. You could hear it earlier with the bike. You can also see this little twig that's been kicked up. that means that there's some kind of vehicle. As well, you can really hear things very well. So here I'm concerned. I hear tracks, so I'm thinking Stug, but you know, it's sort of unclear. What's there? We realize, oh, a martyr. So I think that's a really big mistake. If you're playing deck, you might consider this as well. It's just not a very powerful unit. A very bad rotation speed. It doesn't really do anything that a AT gun doesn't accomplish, right? So I'm not really concerned about it at all, and I'm not even necessarily concerned about how do I counter it. This doesn't change our plans at all.
Let's get this over with.
I am a bit concerned though of this Pathfinder squad. You'll notice me playing on the mini-map there. I'm not going to just immediately retreat him because this retreat path is going to take him into the path of at least 2 Panzer Grenadiers. Manually I move him a bit to the south, and then once he comes into contact, then he can get through, right? So something to be concerned about again especially when you're farther away from your headquarters. You want to be concerned about your unit's retreat paths. Okay, our Sherman is now coming out, first one. The only real weakness that we have right now is my own ineptitude, in that you'll notice we have our machine gun still up north, not really covering anything or doing anything. That's something to be, I always used to gripe on my students about, like, think about unit activity. What are my units doing, right? Think about just check in on them and ask yourself, well, what are they doing? Well, this one's retreating and going to be reinforcing, that's fine. Maybe my paras, I guess they're going to be supporting my half-track, so they have a job, and my other Pathfinder squad is doing the same, right? So just asking yourself, are my units doing everything that they need to be doing right now? Where can my units be effective and contributing to my plan? And that's how you're going to raise your APM, and that's how you're going to become a more effective commander. So we have a lull in the fight. I'm just kind of going through that mental checklist right now. As we say, healing comes up now that we have the first Sherman, and we're just kind of thinking about supporting the half-track, waiting for, like I say earlier, our strategy of trying to catch the DAC a bit overextended. And we get our machine gun out of there, thank goodness. Try to get our units as active as we can. So in this position here as well, if I had gone double NG to begin with, I'd be definitely considering constructing cover.
The enemy have taken territory from us.
And we see the martyr as maybe a target. We're interrupted there by that squad, so we decide, hey, let's go. An isolated squad, that seems like a really good target to bring all of our units to bear here. And you'll notice when I'm attacking, I'm using just about all my units. The only thing that isn't involved is my NG squad, which is low, my paths, which is just retreated, and my machine gun, which is still up north. Even if I didn't have my vehicles, I'd still consider taking this fight, because with his MG deployed in a ugly position, not covering anything, I can easily get around here and cause some damage, probably even take the point. So these are fights that you want to be really looking out for and taking. And when we have our vehicles there, we're just going to roll right over them. And this is obviously very positive for us. We see him almost blunder the martyr there because it's unsupported. When you're using those kinds of units, make sure to support them. You really shouldn't ever be diving just randomly, unless you know you can. Again, we discussed the reasons why I think I can here, right? He won't have mines, he's behind on his tech, and I think he's going to be vulnerable, right? So I decide to take the quad mount to take him on. And I almost think this is a mistake, because a lot of players, they'll want to just repair this martyr. They'll think it still has value, despite maybe not being the best unit. And they're going to spend resources keeping it alive, resources and time. That's resources and time that isn't very well spent, because we own basically all 3 VPs and almost all of the map. So you almost want to be thinking strategically, there's no reason for me to destroy that, right? It almost is such a burden that our opponent, keeping it alive, is giving us more of an advantage, which is maybe a damning thing to say of the martyr, but that's it's something to consider in your own games about, hey, what is his army composition, where are the weaknesses, and how do I fully exploit them, right? So here's an interesting kind of fight where I want to get the squad wipe here, which I think I can, but I have to kind of inch away from him attacking out of his headquarters at the same time. So I managed to get the squad wipe, which is our goal, and now we can actually form a cohesive front line.
Alright, let's move out. Confirm, we'll get a 50 cal. Alright, boys, orders. Why am I just doing what you're told?
All ears, sir.
And again, we decide to dive. He can't stop it. So, you know, we're exchanging some repair time for a bit of manpower and also just the shock. We get our mines to further entrench. We have really everything going for us right now. And you'll find this happens a lot with builds like this, where at the start of the game you might be a bit weak, you might play a bit defensively, but once your shock units come on, you'll find you'll rout them, and you're going to have to play very hard to come back. Right? Something new in CoH3 to consider as well. There's a bit of a hill here, and unfortunately my Sherman's it's using a shot blocker, so I should have microed it to actually put it on the hill. I didn't want to necessarily get too close, but you know, it's not doing any damage here, so something to be mindful about when you're tactically arranging your own troops, making sure that your shot blockers are you do have to be worried about the terrain a bit more than you used to. Again, just getting all of our units active, right? Things are repaired. Keep fighting. Not very much to it.
One of our sectors is now in enemy hands. They have 200 points remaining.
Second Sherman's come up. And this is a bit interesting where the Sherman kind of gets caught rotating and traversing. I'm just going to try my best to... Yeah, okay. So anytime you see... We discussed this earlier, but it's a really important point to hammer home. Anytime you see support weapons in a formation like this, you can usually be pretty certain that your opponent is attack moving them, which is fine, right? That's going to be very useful for getting them into position. But once they are in position and deployed, if he's not automatically targeting, or if he's not manually targeting your vehicles, we call our smoke launch in there. Just make sure that this Sherman as many opportunities as it can to retreat. You can do things like pulling in another unit to draw fire, much like we did with the Pathfinders before. I ordered the Sherman in here. It's not even going to do very much damage to these guns. It's not here to kill them. It's here just to act as a damage sponge to hopefully make sure our other Sherman gets away. Just trying to give it as many chances as it can. Again, trying to make up for a micro mistake. Right. Tanks those 2 shots. Smoke comes in. Germans are now safe. Right. So, and really, I should be backing up a lot further, especially if you have engine critical. You might want to keep it there for the main gun to do some damage, but it's probably safe just to get him out of there. Unfortunately, the Paras get suppressed and pinned, otherwise maybe they could have taken down that machine gun. Or, my apologies to the 250. And yeah, we just have to route. We just have to run here. I have to compliment the DAC player because before, you'll notice, right, that he had tried to attack out both ways, but I could pretty easily either choose which one to kind of cut off, and I managed to cut off both in that engagement. Here he decides just to punch up the middle and use all of his units and forces the rout, right? It's something to be considering about with when you are kind of up against the ropes as well. There'll be situations where you might just be forced to use all of your units, which you should be doing when you're attacking anyways, but to try and gain some ground again. We have our 76 upgrade after healing, which is really just the kind of the nail in the coffin for our opponent. These Shermans are now going to behave like Tiger tanks. Panzer IIIs aren't going to help. His vehicles will pretty much be nullified. He's going to be forced into Flak 36, and that's going to be just slow and unwieldy. When you're down 200 point deficit, down to your last 100 points, it's really difficult when your only anti-tank option is very limited. And again, we're in the late game, but we don't really think any differently. Here I can see that this MG has a bad arc. These guns have a bad arc. So I think I can get around him here and outflank and really kind of take this game. When I'm thinking about this fight too, it goes back to what we're saying at the very start. What can I achieve in this? And if I lose, let's say I lost both Shermans and my quad, that's obviously a very big loss, but I can still replace them. Those losses aren't as substantial as really his only AT options. If those go down, that's it. There's the DAC players, he's just gone. He's out of it, right? So relatively, these units are worth so much more than what we stand to lose. And that's kind of the calculation that I'm trying to make in my head as well, while I'm thinking about how I want to approach or even take these fights to begin with. And you'll see it's a bit unfortunate that my Sherman ran into the half track there, so he takes 2 hits instead of the both of them getting through. I probably could have microed it a bit differently as well, thinking about moving around instead of trying to reverse, but again, we're not. That AT gun is so important to him that it's, although the numbers don't make sense, that's still a very good trade for us. Even though again, probably shouldn't be trading these. Try a phosphorus shot there, doesn't really do what we want, but looked cool. Get our machine gun. Again, we're just making sure all of our units are active here, doing important things. And I'm get greedy. Try and destroy that Panzer III, really drive the nail home, but I think, yeah, at least we trade the half track. You can tell he's getting kind of exhausted as well. His micro is failing. And yeah, there's an AT gun, so we decide to back up. Just 2 Shermans is better than 1. And look at that, just a useful machine gun, right? When all your units are active doing something, that one machine gun pinned 3 units, and that's maybe the last chance he'll have to attack, just even time-wise, right? So, yeah, we couldn't be happier with our position.
M16 ready to chew him up. Up front and center.
We got a mission in the shore. Weapon girl, why am I always carrying the gun? AT crew standing by, we'll punch right through those suckers. Sherman, seeking them out.
Again, just your basic mechanics. Anytime you can't recrew a team weapon, it's best just to destroy it, deny it to your opponent. And there we are. Victory. And there we have it. Appreciate you tuning in. If you took something away, let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe as I try and build this channel up. Could really use your help. If you really like things, why don't you tell me about it over a coffee? You can put your name on the board too as we get things going. Really appreciate you tuning in. See you in the next one.